Imagine your home, your possessions, everything you've worked for, suddenly being swept away in the middle of the night.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Not by some, distant catastrophe, but right here in Addis Ababa. That's the reality Johannes faced when the river just surged through his neighborhood. But look, this isn't just a story about rain, is it? It feels like a window into something bigger.
Absolutely. Johannes' experience, it's a stark reminder, really, of the interconnected challenges Addis Ababa is dealing with right now.
Right.
So we've pulled together a whole range of sources for you reports on this. Severe flooding, the shifts in tourism, these big plans to overhaul agricultural finance.
A lot going on.
Yeah, and debates on foreign investment in housing, our really critical doctor strike, the impact of this new e-commerce giant, worries about pesticides, and even the tough spot South Sudanese students are in.
Wow, okay. That's quite a comprehensive look at the city then.
Exactly.
And while it might seem like a lot to cover, our goal here is to connect these dots, right? These seemingly separate issues.
Precisely.
We want to give you, the listener, a deeper understanding of the key dynamics, the opportunities shaping Addis Ababa today, going way beyond just the headlines.
Think of it as your fast track to getting genuinely informed about a city that's at a really interesting point in its development.
We're not just looking at isolated incidents. We're diving deep to see how these different sectors, these challenges, are actually interacting.
Yeah, creating this complex, dynamic environment that, it affects everyone living and working there.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with that immediate crisis, the flooding that turned Johannes' life upside down. His story really, it stuck with me. Watching the Wayanamba River for 2 years, and then, bam, it breaches its banks, destroys his home. And it wasn't just the rain, was it? He suspected something else.
Not at all. Johannes thought the riverbed was blocked, filled with soil and construction debris from upstream. And our sources back this up. They point to industrial waste dumping, possibly from garment and textile factories near Lemmy Industrial Park and, overwhelmed sewage systems as major factors.
I think a mix of things.
Yeah, and one resident, Katsapola, even talked about being scared of chemical contamination in the water. It really highlights the tough choices people in those areas face with, frankly, few other options.
That paints a really concerning picture. And Addis Ababa's geography itself, that plays a role too, doesn't it? It sits in a basin with 3 main rivers, Bandikitu, Kabena, and the big one, the Akaki.
That's correct. And the Akaki River system, while it's vital, it's also heavily polluted. Sections are described as dead rivers, basically an open sewer.
Open sewer, goodness.
Yeah, from industries, households, farms, all sorts of waste. And this pollution, it has direct consequences for communities downstream. They might be using this water for drinking, for irrigation.
Which means contaminated water could be growing food that ends up right back on city tables. Yeah. It's a sobering thought.
It is.
And the speed of urbanization in Addis Ababa seems to be making the flooding worse. All that concrete, the iron roofs.
Absolutely. They seriously increase the surface runoff when it rains heavily. Plus, you've got the problem of construction happening right in floodplains, often informal settlements like Churekabet.
Which are the most vulnerable, I imagine?
Exactly. They lack proper drainage, proper infrastructure, and, ironically, even droughts make it worse.
Droughts? How does that work? That seems counterintuitive.
Well, when the soil gets incredibly dry and hard after a long drought, it just can't absorb water like it normally would.
Yeah, okay.
So when the rains finally do come, the water just runs off much faster, increasing the risk of flash floods. And with predictions for a more frequent, more intense droughts, this cycle could just get worse.
We also saw that tragic story from the Lapto district flooding in 2023, where an entire family was lost. It sounds like there was hardly any warning, very little protection for those communities. And the head of the Urban Beautification Bureau pointed to illegal settlements being in those high-risk zones.
Yeah, and that highlights this recurring challenge, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The vulnerability of informal settlements built in disaster-prone areas. A hydrometeorologist, Memo Kassane, he emphasizes that land use patterns and, frankly, inadequate waste management are the primary drivers here.
Right.
So much of the city's natural ground cover is just paved over now. He also mentioned design flaws in the drainage infrastructure itself, like the manholes are too small or too far apart.
And it's not like these floods are a new phenomenon either. The sources mentioned big ones in the past. CMT Roundabout shut down in 2018. Areas near Ambassador Theater, Arat Kilo, flooded back in 2015. And the southern part of the city seems especially vulnerable.
Yes, the terrain there is flatter, and there's been really rapid development in areas like Nifas Silklafto. That's made them more flood-prone.
Okay.
The Fire and Disaster Risk Management Commission estimates about 15,000 residents across the city are at risk. Districts like Addis, Kitima, Kirkos, Akwaki Quality, Bole, they're flagged as having the highest vulnerability.
That's a huge number of people.
It is. And the story of Deslan Tefera in Meneleshter, whose home floods every single rainy season, it just drives home this ongoing threat.
It's good to hear the roads authority is trying to clear drainage lines, but it sounds like a constant battle with uncovered manholes and people just dumping garbage.
It's a system under constant stress. And one hydrologist, Tilahun Azajan, makes a pretty stark call. Relocate people in the most dangerous spots, and maybe even halt construction during the rainy season.
Wow, that's a drastic measure.
It is. On a slightly more positive note, there's a new law criminalizing dumping waste into rivers. That gives a stronger legal tool for environmental protection.
But for people like Johannes, as you said, these measures might feel like too little too late, given the immediate impact.
Exactly. The devastation is already done for them.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit. It was quite surprising to read that even though tourist arrivals in Addis Ababa are apparently up, traditional restaurants are really struggling. You'd think more tourists equals more business, right?
That's the logical assumption, yeah.
Uh,
But the reality seems quite different. Well-known places, like Waiodi, Abyssinia, they've seen a significant drop in daily visitors. They've even had to cut their hours.
Really?
Yeah, and their tour division has actually pivoted more towards outbound tourism, helping Ethiopians travel abroad, like to Jerusalem.
Interesting shift. And it's not just them.
No, Pagaman Tour and Travel is seeing similar things. Fewer inbound groups, so they're diversifying. It's odd because, the sources show tourism grew substantially before COVID hit.
Right, I remember reading about that boom period.
Yeah, between about 2010 and 2018, arrivals nearly doubled. Tourism became a big source of foreign cash and jobs, but the pandemic obviously hit hard.
Of course.
And while the 2024 arrival numbers look optimistic, almost 1 million tourists, it seems a large chunk are business travelers. They're in town for conferences, not necessarily hitting the traditional restaurants.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. Addis being such a diplomatic and NGO hub.
Exactly. There were 84 conferences mentioned.
But getting accurate data on tourism's actual economic impact seems like a real challenge. How do they even count who's a tourist?
That's a major hurdle. The definition of tourist, how arrivals are counted, it can inflate the numbers sometimes. Other countries, like Kenya, seem to have more detailed tracking. There's a plan for something called a tourist satellite account, or TSA, which should give more precise data. That would be really helpful for everyone involved.
Definitely.
And the experience of Capital Traditional Restaurant really underscores the struggle. Their daily visitors dropped from maybe 150, 170 down to just 510. They're relying on events now.
Wow, that's a massive drop.
It is, and even conference attendees often just eat at their hotels.
So what's behind this downturn, specifically for the traditional spots? It can't just be the rise of business travel.
Well, according to experts like Demek Kibru from Jimmy University, tourist preferences are changing. People want higher quality service, more personalized experiences that, cater to different cultural needs.
Like what?
Like offering specific vegetarian options for tourists from India, for example. And unfortunately, safety concerns might still be playing a role in their choices, too.
Right.
So these traditional places might need to adapt, enhance the whole dining experience, maybe offer those tailored menus to meet these evolving expectations.
Okay, adaptation is key. Let's switch gears again to a different kind of transformation. The central bank's big push to modernize agricultural finance, this NAFER initiative. Agriculture is so vital for Ethiopia, but farmers seem to face huge hurdles getting credit.
That's a critical point. Agriculture contributes massively to GDP, jobs, exports, but the share of bank loans going to the sector is surprisingly low, like 8% last fiscal year.
Only 8%.
Yeah, and a lot of that was just for fertilizer, mainly through the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia. The actual credit reaching farmers was like maybe 2% of what they estimated was needed.
Wow. Why are banks so hesitant?
Well, the National Bank points to several things. Limited funds banks have available to lend, the perceived high risks in agriculture, logistical challenges in reaching lots of small farmers, coordination issues, regulations, low financial literacy among farmers, lack of risk management tools. It's a long list.
Okay, a complex problem. So what exactly is NAFER trying to do about it? It sounds like it has different parts.
It does. 3 main pillars. The first is NAFA, the National Agri-Finance Accelerator. It's designed to make lending less risky for banks
No.
through things like refinancing options, risk-sharing mechanisms, credit guarantees. It also wants to build up interbank markets for ag finance and even introduce something called agro-securitization, basically selling bundles of farm loans on the stock exchange.
Okay, so making it safer and more attractive for banks. What's the second pillar?
That's fast as farmer access to streamlined financial services. This focuses on using tech apps, digital platforms to give farmers real-time access to credit, savings, payments. The idea is to build a more transparent, traceable value chain.
Makes sense. And the third?
The COE Agri-Finance Center of Excellence. This will be a hub for improving financial literacy for farmers and strengthening risk management within agricultural institutions, training networks, that sort of thing.
It sounds comprehensive. And we're already seeing digital platforms like Lursha trying to connect farmers and banks.
Right.
But they're hitting roadblocks with KYC, know your customer stuff.
Exactly. Lursha has profiled tons of farmers digitally, but banks still need things like TIN numbers, national IDs, land certificates, which many smallholders just don't have easily accessible.
A practical barrier.
Yeah, but their pilot project with Dash and Bank and the IFC was encouraging. High repayment rates, increased farmer incomes. It shows the potential of these digital tools. Still, surveys like the one from the Ethiopian Economic Association show credit access is still really low overall for the sector.
And even established groups like the Romeo Coffee Farmers Cooperatives Union are struggling to get loans. That seems counterintuitive too.
It does. It's worrying that banks are sometimes reluctant to accept farmland as collateral, and the Development Bank of Ethiopia actually suspended loans for rain-fed agriculture.
Suspended loans for rain-fed. But isn't that most farming in Ethiopia?
It absolutely is, the vast majority. DBE cited concerns about bad loans, but it's a huge blow for farmers and potentially for exports.
Right.
There's some hope with discussions around collateral reform and a new law allowing movable assets like equipment or livestock as collateral. But farmers like Asima Zaga still talk about the huge costs of labor and inputs for rain-fed farming.
It's clearly not just about the loans themselves.
No. And people like Melkamu Abraham from the Crop Producers and Exporters criticize excluding rain-fed farming from finance schemes, arguing they need long-term support. Others, like Malukina Sima from Metu University, point out that farm management practices and post-harvest losses are also huge challenges.
So improving finance access is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle.
Precisely. The IFC's Riyad Newar stressed needing well-designed policies and leveraging digital finance. And Tetsuhiden Admasu from St. Mary University summed it up nicely. You need to de-risk the sector. That means things like input loans in kind, rural credit scores, and really investing in farmer education.
Oh, okay. Let's move to another major policy debate now, this proposed bill about foreign investment in housing. The idea is to attract foreign money by letting foreign nationals lease land and own homes, but, and this is key, they can't borrow locally to do it.
Yeah, it's a tricky balancing act they're trying to pull off. Attract foreign direct investment, FDI, while, as officials put it, not infringing on citizens' land rights.
A fine line.
Definitely. The bill has limits. No ownership in government-funded public housing unless it's a PPP, a public-private partnership, max 5 properties per person, and all deals must be in foreign currency.
But it's facing pushback from legislators.
It is. A big sticking point is that ban on local borrowing. Some MPs argue that actually allowing foreign currency loans from local banks could help ease Ethiopia's foreign exchange shortage.
Interesting counter-argument.
Yeah, and MP Fethi Mehdi suggested a more nuanced approach. Maybe allow some limited domestic financing after the investor is established, and have flexible minimum investment amounts to encourage investment outside Addis, spreading the potential benefits.
And what's the view from the banking sector itself?
It's mixed. Demisi Kasa from the Bankers Association seems generally supportive of bringing in dollars, but others, like Tedesi Hatia from Sadama Bank, proposed a compromise. Maybe 50% foreign capital, 50% domestic borrowing. Gawit Kino from Hijira Bank pointed out existing rules already restrict foreign currency lending by local banks and stress, protecting national interests. And an economist, Nazar Yunus, is strongly against foreign borrowing, saying local entrepreneurs should get priority.
Then there are the social implications, which sound really significant. Displacement, creating enclaves.
Absolutely. MP Deslain Chain specifically warned about pushing out low-income residents. Ababa Desalu raised constitutional questions about land ownership. Nazar Yunus worried about rising housing prices making things even harder for locals.
Yeah, that's a common concern with foreign property investment.
Right. He suggested maybe incentives for building middle and lower income housing. And Amaya Tefero raised concerns about threatening local developers and the risk of capital flight if it's not handled carefully.
So if this bill passes, what are the actual requirements for a foreign investor?
They'd need legal documents, a minimum investment of $150,000 U.S., and they'd apply to the Ministry of Urban Development and Infrastructure. There's supposed to be a 2-week decision period.
But it's been sent back for more review.
Yes, referred for further scrutiny, and some MPs objected. So it's definitely not a done deal yet. There's still quite a bit of debate around it.
Okay, now let's turn to something really critical and, frankly, deeply concerning.
Yeah.
The nationwide doctor strike and the broader healthcare crisis. The image of public hospitals falling silent is, well, it's chilling.
It is a stark and incredibly worrying situation. It really shows the level of dissatisfaction, maybe even desperation, among doctors who feel severely undervalued.
And the salaries seem incredibly low.
Shockingly low. The advertised starting salary for a new GP in a public hospital is around $10,600 birr. That's roughly $80 a month.
$80 a month?
Yes. Compare that to private practice, or even just the basic cost of living. And nurses, other essential staff, they face similar low wages. This has fueled the strike, which came after years of trying to get attention, submitting a 12-point petition about wages, incentives.
So this isn't new?
Not at all. These low wages aren't just about fairness. They're a symptom of chronic underinvestment. It threatens the whole system.
And it's not just pay, is it? They're talking about crumbling equipment, shortages of supplies, having to improvise in remote areas.
Exactly. It paints a picture of a system under immense strain, severely under-resourced.
And the government's initial reaction.
Calling the strike unethical, illegal, detaining some doctors, ordering people back to work, trying to hire fresh grads. It seems to have just escalated tensions, deepened the sense of grievance.
What about the budget? Hasn't health spending increased?
Nominally, yes. But when you factor in inflation, the real purchasing power has actually shrunk. So effectively, the budget's smaller in practical terms.
And even though there are more facilities, more staff overall, it hasn't kept up with population growth.
Correct. So the doctor-to-population ratio, nurse-to-population ratio, they're still alarmingly low. Way below WHO standards, especially outside the main cities.
Where are the shortages worst?
Peripheral regions like Somali, Afar, but even major hospitals in Addis, like Takur and Bessa, are stretched way beyond capacity. Staff are overworked, resources are limited.
And the reliance on foreign donors makes things uncertain too.
It does create vulnerabilities. And community-based health insurance, while helpful, hasn't fully protected people from high out-of-pocket costs. The government pleads fiscal constraint, low per capita spending compared to the regions, but the potential consequences of not addressing this are incredibly serious.
It really sounds like paying healthcare workers properly isn't just fair, it's essential for the system to even function.
It's an existential issue, really. Better pay could reduce turnover, slow down the brain drain, and ultimately lead to better care, better outcomes.
Are there any middle ground options being discussed, like allowing some private practice?
That's been suggested, yes. Limited private practice performance bonuses, these could be constructive steps. But fundamentally, this strike points to broader governance issues, maybe prioritizing big showcase projects over essential services like health.
And the human cost is already being felt.
Devastatingly so. Reports of babies born without skilled help, people missing dialysis, fatal emergencies because care wasn't available. It's tragic. And there's a real risk of talent just leaving the country for better pay elsewhere.
So what's needed now?
Urgent negotiation. Phased, substantial wage rises. Clear timelines for fixing equipment and infrastructure. Investing in health isn't optional. It's foundational for growth, stability, public well-being, and trying to suppress dissent just undermines everything.
A really critical situation. Okay, let's shift again to something maybe more optimistic, though still evolving. Zemin Gebeya, Ethio Telecom's new digital marketplace. This sounds like it could really shake up e-commerce in Ethiopia.
It certainly has that potential, yes. Launching it within the Telebirr Super app, which so many people already use, was a smart move. It generated a lot of buzz.
And interestingly, smaller delivery companies who were initially worried about competition have actually seen more business.
Some have, yeah. Ethio Telecom says its goal is to boost trust in online shopping, smooth out logistics and payments, which are big hurdles in Ethiopia's relatively young e-commerce market. Consumer confidence and efficient delivery are key challenges.
How are the existing e-commerce players reacting? It sounds mixed.
Very mixed. Barakat Tades from Aziza was worried, but then saw deliveries surge. Tamrat Zudi at Aradamart sees it as both a potential lifeline and a major threat. Yusuf Hailu at Small worries about price wars and losing users, but also admits Zeman Gabeya could raise awareness and build trust overall.
So Ethio Telecom is saying they want to collaborate.
That's the message. They're positioning themselves as a facilitator, an enabler, not just another retailer. They're talking about a phased rollout, recruiting independent couriers.
But smaller players are still nervous about Ethio Telecom's sheer size and marketing power.
Understandably so. Barakat Tedesse voiced those fears that Ethio Telecom could unintentionally stifle smaller businesses. Dagmawit Abe from Keaton's Coffee offered a different view, seeing e-commerce as potentially a federation of specialized sites, suggesting there's room for everyone if they find their niche.
What are the main logistical challenges Nebi Utai from the Leftia Training Institute mentioned?
He stressed logistics and business models are crucial. Things like stock mismatches, showing something online that isn't actually available, really hurt consumer trust.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
He praised Zeman Gabeya's design, the Telebur integration, the marketing, but also worried about distorted competition because Ethio Telecom is so dominant in telecoms and mobile money. Though he did say price comparison features could be good for consumers.
And Jamal Yimer from Hello Mart sees partnership potential but wants a level playing field.
Exactly. Fair competition is the key concern. Ethio Telecom says they have safeguards for merchants, secure payments, they're talking to logistics firms, figuring out fees. They give merchants a dashboard to manage things.
They're framing it as digital public infrastructure.
Yeah, part of the bigger digital transformation push. But the worry persists among delivery riders. Will Ethio Telecom eventually use its own fleet and squeeze them out of last-mile delivery?
Right.
Tamrat from Aradamart even suggested a shared tech standard for delivery, maybe to prevent one player dominating. And Ethio Telecom's Solomon Ibarra mentioned possibly creating a separate delivery platform under the Telebur brand, even inviting Ethio Post to join.
So the big question is regulatory clarity, isn't it? Ensuring fair competition when one player is so dominant in related sectors like payments and potentially delivery.
That's the core uncertainty going forward. How will the ecosystem evolve?
Okay, finally, let's tackle the serious issue of pesticide use and regulation. Finding banned pesticides in avocados is a pretty alarming starting point. It really highlights the need for stronger controls and farmer awareness.
It is indeed very serious. It underscores this urgent need for better regulation and much more awareness in farming communities. The Ethiopian Agricultural Authority, the EAA, they're concerned.
Yeah.
Rising pesticide use, weak enforcement, health hazards, lack of proper training for farmers.
And pesticide use has gone up dramatically.
Hugely in recent years. Ethiopia now ranks among the highest users in Africa.
And many of these registered pesticides are actually classified as highly hazardous.
Yes, by the Pesticide Action Network. And the lack of robust monitoring, proper risk assessment, it creates a significant vulnerability for agriculture and public health.
What did the EAA say about the regulation process itself?
Abaya Alemu from the EAA explained the process but admitted big weaknesses after registration. Monitoring, enforcement. They don't even have a fully equipped local lab for proper testing. They have to rely on expensive overseas labs.
That sounds like a major bottleneck.
It is. Plus, there are loopholes. Unregistered pesticides can be imported for research, emergencies, or other, quote, compelling reasons. And pesticides for the flower farms, which mainly export, are often regulated based on the standards of the export market, not necessarily what's safe for food grown domestically.
Right, different standards. And we heard about flower farm practices from Tana Flora and Adam Horticulture, but then there was that farmer admitting to using flower pesticides on tomatoes.
Yes, Methuselah Wele. He attributed it to illiteracy, lack of training, and the really troubling part is that these potentially contaminated tomatoes are apparently reaching major markets without being checked.
That's deeply concerning. What solutions were suggested?
Ermias Abulna stressed the lack of basic safety training for farmers, unsafe mixing, disposal, using pesticides on the wrong crops. He suggested empowering inspectors, getting international help for training on integrated pest management, IPM, using polluter pays principles, subsidizing protective gear, community monitoring.
So a multi-pronged approach.
Yes. Dumena Delina from the Agricultural Bureau also mentioned poor communication during pest outbreaks contributes to misuse. And farmer Mulu Jedawar Riso highlighted another issue. Local pesticide manufacturers like Adami Tulu can't meet demand. And genuine products are expensive, so cheap, fake, often smuggled pesticides are common. He called for training and regular farm inspections.
Fake pesticides, too. That adds another layer of risk.
Absolutely. Abaya Alemu from the EAA suggested maybe decentralizing regulation could help improve local oversight. But the bottom line, as Ermias Abelnet warned, is the risk of trading short-term yield gains for long-term harm to health, the environment, and the whole agricultural sector.
A critical balancing act. Okay, our final topic today. The really difficult situation for many South Sudanese students in Ethiopia. They're effectively stranded because of unpaid immigration penalty fees. Moses Okoye's story of not being able to go home after graduating is just heartbreaking.
It is a deeply unfortunate situation. We're talking about over 1,500 South Sudanese students affected. Recent regulatory changes jacked up the residency permit fee significantly.
No.
It went from maybe $10 a day, which was often waived for scholarship students, to suddenly $30 a day. For students whose scholarships only cover tuition and accommodation, this created a massive, unexpected debt. For nearly 200 graduates, the unpaid fines are now thousands of dollars each.
Thousands? Wow. So they literally can't afford to leave.
Exactly. They're stuck. And these weren't fees they expected to pay, especially the scholarship students who previously had waivers.
So the rules changed abruptly.
That's what it sounds like. Daniel Dialok from the South Sudanese Students' Union called it a devastating blow. Many students come from tough backgrounds. These stranded graduates are becoming really vulnerable, jobless, some reportedly resorting to risky behaviors out of sheer desperation.
And Moses Okoye's story, where he was trying to get a waiver and the penalties just kept piling up without him realizing.
Yeah. It tragically shows the bureaucratic nightmare they're caught in. The Ethiopian Ministry of Education acknowledges the difficulty, but says officially they aren't obligated to cover these fees. They put the responsibility mainly on the South Sudanese embassy, though they did hint they might consider some assistance.
Have the students gotten any help from their embassy or the Ethiopian authorities?
Largely unsuccessful, it seems. Lots of promises, but little concrete action, according to the students. Which is disheartening, especially since Ethiopia is still accepting new South Sudanese scholarship students and even paying their initial visa costs.
That seems inconsistent. What does Ethiopian immigration say?
Gosa Demissi from Immigration basically said they enforce the rules as written. They can't just grant exemptions without a legal basis or a change in the law. He acknowledged informal appeals but said there's no official request or grounds for a widespread waiver. He also mentioned the latest directive has very few exemptions and hinted that past abuses by some students overstaying might have led to stricter enforcement now.
And a legal expert confirmed the students are legally responsible.
Yes, Yared Siyam confirmed that under law, the students owe the fees, even if embassies paid before. His advice was to seek formal waivers through diplomatic channels. But of course, that takes time.
Time these students don't really have.
Exactly. For people like Moses, it offers little immediate relief. They're stuck in limbo. Daniel Dialok just pleaded for a temporary reprieve. Just let them go home.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it's clear Addis Ababa is juggling this incredibly complex mix of challenges and, well, opportunities too.
Absolutely.
We've looked at flooding made worse by urbanization and waste, tourism struggling despite more visitors, the big push to fix farm finance, the heated debates on foreign housing investment, that critical doctors strike revealing a health system under pressure,
the arrival of a potentially disruptive e-commerce giant, the serious worries about pesticide misuse, and this really tough situation for the South Sudanese students.
Yeah. By weaving all these threads together, hopefully you, our listener, now have a much fuller, more nuanced picture of the dynamics really shaping the city and the lives of the people there.
It's definitely not just one single story.
No, it's many stories intertwined.
Ah.
Which brings us to our final thought for you. Given all these diverse pressures, all these initiatives we've talked about, what fundamental shifts do you think are most crucial for Addis Ababa's sustainable future, for the well-being of its residents?
What stood out most to you?
Yeah, what did you find most surprising, or maybe most concerning? Something to think about. We encourage you to keep pondering these connections, maybe dig deeper into the topics that really caught your attention today.